I'll just open us up in a word of prayer again for this one, and then we'll get into some questions. Father, thank you again just for life and that we get to live it. Thank you for each of our own unique purposes and giftings and callings that you have for us. Even if they aren't known, and even if they aren't known until we're like 70, that's okay. We just want to trust you with that, and please just reveal that thing to us as we go on our journeys and as we learn and as we grow. I thank you for each person here. I pray that you would anoint their words and that your spirit would be here and moving us as we learn and receive. We love you, God. It's in your name I pray. Amen. So first question, which is might be a little hard to differentiate, but I mean, you guys probably know. I know it's hard for me to differentiate. Is what is the difference between vocation and calling in your own personal definitions of those things?
I think calling is something that like you just are passionate about, and you feel like the Lord has like inspired you to run after and do and chase, and it can change with time for sure. And then I think vocation is like a job that you might have throughout life, which also changes. And I think that they don't always have to align. I think sometimes it's really hard to like be like, oh my gosh, like I need to figure out what I need to do and like what I want to go to school for. And there's a lot of pressure to figure out your entire life right now. But like I think they can be flexible over time. Like the Lord is never done like working with us and working on us and using us. So that calling can change over time, and it doesn't always have to be like your vocation. So I don't know, like for example, like I work at Target, and so that's not really like a vocation I want to have forever necessarily, or like even something I feel called to do. It's just like, this is how I'm making money right now. And I guess it's like my vocation, I don't know. But like in that, I can still like lead out my calling of like seeking truth and speaking truth to people while I'm there. Like maybe not explicitly being like, do you know Jesus to every person, but like being kind to people and like just showing Jesus to other people. Yeah, so I think like they can always intercede with each other, but they don't have to be exactly the same either.
Yeah, your vocation, it's your job, right? And so I would say something that, and I'm a little hesitant to say, because I don't know if your calling necessarily defines you, but if you kind of separate the two, your vocation or your job, it doesn't define you, but your calling is a big part of who you are. Like, and it's actually, like, it's almost, you can think of it as part of your DNA even. And so your calling, it's something that you can live out, and it's done through your job, through your vocation. It's done through your relationships. It's done through your interactions with people. And if you can align the two, it's really awesome, because then what you spend most of your day doing, your job, eventually so your job right now is being a student. And so if you can align my calling to my job, then all of a sudden you kind of hit this sweet spot. So the question that we had you guys try and think about before, what I want the legacy of my life to be, that's kind of starting to get at what's my calling. And I think sometimes we're always asked, like, Lord, like, what's my calling? Like, how do I do this? Like, what is it? I don't want to miss it. But I think a lot of times it's the Lord asking us, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to do? What are you passionate about? So
I tend to think about calling as kind of a broader thing that applies to your whole life, and I think about vocation as kind of the specific context that you're working within at the moment, or in whatever season that is. So in my experience, just as an example, like I believe my calling to be helping people to experience the presence of God, of Jesus. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. The context that I work within is worship leading. And I heard this quote, I'm bad at giving sources right now, but there's a quote that I think it's that your calling is where your deepest joy meets the world's deepest need.
Frederick
And so I think, what?
Frederick Buechner.
Thank you. Oh,
I've heard that one
supporting
too.
me.
Yeah.
Okay, sources. But I always love to think about that, because it's like, okay, we can think about some of the things like, what has God gifted you in? What is God, like, what like lights your heart up? What makes you excited? Or like stirs something up in you? and then where is there a need? And I think that God's calling for us often lies in that sweet spot. So it may not necessarily tie into what job you're doing or whatever, but sometimes it might.
Yeah.
So I think there is kind of a cool intersection that can happen.
That's really
but
cool. Yeah. Like I have a gifting in dance, but my job isn't centered around dance, right? And so, but I do get to. I am a part of dance ministry. I'm on the same dance team as Megan, and so we are, you know.
And Alexa now.
And Alexa.
She's
now.
joining.
I'm really excited about that.
I'll audition next year.
Yes, Brianna.
But it's not like my vocation. It's not it's not my job or my income. But what I had talked about, how I want the people in front of me that I interact to feel valued. A big part of my job is that. And so it's really cool when you start to see that alignment. You guys know what I'm talking about? And so when you think about, like, what are these high level things that I want? And it doesn't have to be something. It could literally just be, hey, I want to show kindness to people. And so, okay, you can do that in whatever job that you have, but it'll make a ridiculously huge impact. So.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. So in relationship to vocation, job stuff, even success, why do you think failure is important? Or thinking about even like school stuff. Not that you should fail things, but like if you do end up having things that don't go the way you want it to.
We have such a fear of failure in this culture, and I think it does us in negatively sometimes. Not that we should strive to be failing, but I think when there's an acceptance of like, okay, I tried this, it didn't work, you learn a ton. Like, it's uncomfortable and it stinks, but you learn a ton, and you learn how to redirect. And like the people I know who are most successful just in life are the people who are like unafraid to try anything and look ridiculous at it and fail and get up and try again. And like, I think failure just encourages us to keep learning and be flexible. And
I think sometimes we define success and failure as like these two very separate things instead of something that's interconnected, and like you need one to get the other. And so we'll define success as this singular point right here instead of everything that led up to it. And everything that led up to it often is failure. And so there's this book called Failing Forward by John Maxwell. It's really good, but it just talks about how it's like the more that you try to avoid failure, the less likely you are to succeed. But the more that you actually fail, the more that you take risks and actually fail, the more likely you are to succeed. And so, I hope I said that right.
Yeah.
But it's just really cool concept of just let's start rewiring the way that we think about failure, and it's actually something that is going to move us forward towards success. You literally can't succeed without having understanding, without having a good relationship with failure.
So, like failing well too.
Yeah.
I think it's part of that.
Yeah. It's like, how do you? And so what's failing well?
Well, I feel like that, like learning how to handle that and learn from it, not be put down by your own failure, not letting it define you or ruin you, but letting it motivate you forward. I think would do.
And I think something to help with failing well is like remembering that when you fail, like that doesn't define you. Like God's plan for you and like what He wants you to do in the world isn't going to depend on like worldly success or failure either. Like just remembering like, okay, maybe I didn't do as well as I wanted to in this thing, or maybe I did completely fail and like flop in this, but what can I learn, and like how is the Lord going to use this to continue growing me and building me, and in the end, like if I give glory to Him through failure and success, like that's still honoring Him.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So this is a hard question because each of us kind of discern differently and are led differently, but what was your specific like discernment and guidance process to get to the vocation that you are in today? Thinking specifically of job stuff. Or you could say even like the step after high school, because that's where some of them are also going. So the next steps for like college or other things.
Yeah. So I don't really have like a job yet, but I can tell you that like the dream I kind of shared with you guys of like what I want to do like sounds really put together, but it has taken me like years to even get to that point, and like I still don't necessarily have a clear picture of what it looks like. And so right after I graduated high school, I just kind of like I went and majored in like what I felt I wanted to learn more about. And I didn't really know like what that would lead to or what that looked like. I just knew that the Lord had given me a passion for like health, and I was like, okay, like we're just gonna see what happens. And it was so cool to see like every single year of college, like the Lord reveal a little bit more of a piece of like what He wanted me to do or what He's maybe called me to do. And so don't be scared if you don't have it all figured out. Like just follow what you're passionate about and what you're gifted in, and like what you feel like the Lord is telling you to go after, and He'll give you all of the steps that you need to do. That doesn't mean just like sit back and do nothing, but like follow what it is you feel passionate about, and it will come clearer and clearer as you go.
I've always said like a big part of my story is just that the Lord's going to provide the next step for you. Not any further than that,
Which is
not any
super
less.
frustrating, right?
Right. It's like you're not going to see past that, but like the next step will be there. And for me, a big part of like, I think it's really important to talk to people that you trust and who know you well. And I mean like probably people who are older and can have a vision of like, I'll never forget my pastor and my youth pastor said to me like, you were made for ministry, you just don't know it yet. And I didn't. And I didn't like pursue that because they said it, but it was funny to see how in my life like they had spoken something over me that I didn't see for myself yet. So talking to trusted like mentors and pastors and your youth leaders, and like that's going to be really important because they can speak into you what they see and know about you. But also I would say like don't put in a box what you think God is doing in your life.
Yeah,
Like quick story time for my life. So like I knew I loved music and wanted to help people and be in ministry, so I thought I would go to college and be a music major. Cool, no problem, easy. I never learned any classical music, so I get to an audition for a music major and cannot, like that was no way my level. So I went through this kind of like identity crisis of like, Lord, I feel like you've called me to do music and now the door's being shut. Like what does that even look like? But then that transferred, me not being a music major gave me the time to get invested in the worship ministries on campus at school, and that's what got me my job now as a worship leader. So if things had gone the way that I expected them to, I would not be where I am and where I very much feel like the Lord has put me. So I think we just have to hold it with open hands and let Him direct you. Yeah.
I think my first experience of like actually feeling like the Lord, feeling disappointed with the Lord, was graduating high school and then going into college for the first couple of years. So like I loved being a student, loved it, and which is probably a little bit different, but I loved academia, and so graduating from high school, I had worked really hard, graduated with like really great grades, and it had always been like college in our family had always been like, oh, this is like the path probably that you guys are going to take, and so that's not the path that everyone needs to take, but that was just kind of what it was like in our family. And in my mind, I had this idea of what type of college I wanted to go to, and I ended up going to Hack for my first 2 years, which is a community college. And looking back now, it's so incredible, and I love that I was able to go to that school for the first 2 years. But in the moment, it felt like a disappointment because I had told God, like, I want to, like, this is a type of school that I want to go to. I want to go to a 4-year school. I want to go away, and I had worked really hard in high school to make sure that could happen. And so it felt like a disappointment. And then there was also like levels of like shame that came with it too, because a lot of my friends who were graduating, they were like, oh, you're going to like a community college, which there's nothing wrong with community colleges. And like I loved my experience there, and I'm so thankful for it. But it was really cool seeing how God had like this, he knew everything, every little aspect of it. And what I didn't know was that my little sister was gonna, it's a little bit of a side, but I didn't know that my little sister was gonna get really sick during the process, and so it was actually really helpful that me and my twin sister were home during that time and not away at college, because we were able to help my family with a lot of things. And so the Lord saw that, and like we didn't. And what I had thought was him like a failure or like an unanswered to prayer ended up being what like launched me into where I'm at today. And so after graduating from Hack, I ended up going to Cornell, which is an Ivy League school, which was super awesome. And it wasn't something that I had thought of, and it wasn't something I thought was possible when I was graduating from high school. So I ended up going from like, oh, I'm being like the Lord's disappointing me, to this is so much better than I ever could have thought or have imagined, and I probably wouldn't have been here if I had just graduated straight from high school and gone to a 4-year school, because that wasn't the type of school that I was looking at. So that was a little bit of a side, but I just kind of wanted to encourage you guys that like regardless of whatever your path ends up looking like, trust God in the process, and it's okay to wrestle with him in disappointment too. And so I think it's, you know, even in the middle of like, this isn't what I expected it to look like, you can give it to him and say like, okay, I'm upset and I'm disappointed, but I trust you with this in the process, and that he has a greater plan. Has anything like that ever happened to you guys, like where you saw him kind of work something out and you saw something come full circle? You don't have to share what it is, but, or maybe not yet. Yeah, you will. Hopefully you'll get to see it. So, and then I just ended up at where I am now. I hope this isn't too long, but I ended up where I am now from a family friend. So after I graduated from Cornell, I moved home. It was freaking scary because you're like, I don't have a job and I don't know what I'm gonna do. And I still honestly didn't really know what exactly I wanted to do. Some people have this idea of like, from the time they're like 7, they know, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that, and I was never that person. And so it was really cool how the Lord just kind of connected me to family friends and just started interning where I'm at now, and that's where that happened. So it's kind of like a really short, condensed version of that story.
Thanks, guys. So next question is, if you guys want to each share a little bit about the importance of like feeling like you can do ministry regardless of your job or vocation, or just like the importance of you don't have to be a missionary to be servants to people, something like that.
I think sometimes as Christians we can get kind of caught up in this idea of like, oh, these people are doing the Lord's work and then I have my job. And so it's like, I don't know, have you guys ever felt that way? Like, oh, like missionaries or pastors or whatever, they are really the ones who are working for God, and then those of us who aren't in like regularly defined ministry, we're not necessarily doing that. I think even if we don't explicitly think that, that's something that we can unintentionally think. And so I love it when I get to see, I don't know, just like God working through my life, like at my job though in particular. And so it may not be super overt, as in like someone has this incredible encounter with the presence of God and they're crying and you get to like counsel them, even though I think there are like moments where something like that can happen. But it's really cool when you can speak into someone's life like, oh, this is how I see you. You know, and something that simple can change someone's life, guys. Like, oh, this is how I see you, and this is where I see you could be going, and just speaking that way in love and in truth, and like just how the Lord sees them. It's really cool to see how God will open up doors for you to share His love in a way that's not like in their face, you know, but can absolutely change their hearts in the process.
It's like the people who love Jesus and live out of that place look different. You just do than the rest of the world. So it's like, I work in a ministry context, and I can tell you, though honestly, sometimes I do feel guilt over like, I'm a person in ministry, but everyone that I know is Christian. And there are people on my teams who have just, regular day jobs, and they are out there just killing it, loving people and pointing them to Jesus because they're in contexts where that's not the norm. And it's such a powerful thing to me. So, yeah, I would just say, like, ministry wasn't just made for the context of being in church or being in youth group or whatever. Like, it's kind of meant to not be. It's supposed to be, like, out in the world. And yeah, I just think there's really incredible opportunities to do that. So yeah.
Yeah. I think like one of the most powerful ways to do ministry is just like living like Jesus and living out Jesus, and you can do that in whatever you're doing. And I'm really bad at like quoting scripture too, but like passage in the Bible talks about like every part of the body like being important and valuable and needed in the church, and like that goes for like vocation or whatever we want to call it. Also, like there needs to be people who are following Jesus in every part of the world.
Yeah.
Like if we all just did ministry, then it'd be kind of pointless to some degree. Like we would feel great, but those who are broken and hurting like wouldn't know who Jesus was. Also, so I think yeah, just living out who Jesus is like the best way to do ministry, and that can happen in every and any context that you feel passionate about.
Yeah. All right, this is our last question before anonymous or spoken questions. But what advice would you give your past self or the teens who are trying to figure out what to do with their lives? Which is also a hard thing.
Don't stress about it. Like I was so stressed about it growing up because I was like, I have no idea. Like, so how many of you guys have an idea, just by raise your hands, of kind of what you want to do? You have like, oh, this is kind of where I think I want to head. Yeah, I had no idea. So, and I was like that way from when I was little, and into college, you know, you're paying a lot of money to be at college. To figure out what it is that you're doing and like work towards that. So that's some pressure, right? You're dropping $50K a year to like work towards something that's close to, it's like this return on investment. So, but I think what's really cool is just seeing like trusting God in the process. I think you have to be smart about it. And so I wouldn't like flippantly spend, like in general, don't like just flippantly spend a lot of money to go to college if you are like, you know.
What's a good push for community college?
Yeah.
Go to community college and try to figure it out first.
It helps so much, and you save a lot of money doing it that way. And so yeah, that was like my route, which helped a lot. But I would, you know, even when I was a senior in college, I was like, well, I kind of like this idea of consulting, but I don't know how to get into it. I don't know. And so it was really cool just seeing how you set yourself up by success by working really hard, but then you also see God make up the difference.
I think one thing, like it's easy to say don't stress about it, and then another thing not
to actually do it.
But like I think that is true, and just like what comes on the opposite side of stressing is like trusting the Lord.
Yeah.
So just remembering like He like knows you, He like knows what He like has planned for you. And so, not that like just don't do everything and like the Lord will do it all, but like He will find a way to like point you to the thing, or like He will provide the ways for you to choose what it is that you want to do. And I think another thing is just like don't compare yourself to someone else's journey. Like even when you're in college and like you might have friends who know exactly what they want to do and like are on this path, and you're still like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Like that's okay. Like everyone has a different journey and a different path and a different story, and like the Lord loves using those. So I just say like trust the Lord, don't compare yourself to someone else, and just follow Him, like, and whatever that looks like for you.
I think just keep being faithful to that next step. Like whatever He's putting in front of you, just be faithful in it, and then guess what? He'll provide the next one. So like off of that, there's a piece of advice that I'm going to steal from a friend who gave it to me. I guess it was a message I heard that they taught, and it was kind of shocking, but essentially what he said, I need to unpack this a little bit, but essentially what he said is like, God doesn't really care like the specifics of what decision you're making. Meaning, God doesn't care if you choose to go to Penn State or Messiah. God's biggest concern isn't whether you take an accounting job or a youth ministry job. Like, not that God doesn't care about those things, because He's invested in every detail of your life. He cares about them. But the safest place that we could possibly be is in God's will. So if you're going to go to Penn State and be pursuing Jesus and what He has for you there, great. It's not going to like
Destroy
you're not going to knock yourself off of the path that God has for you. Like that's part of what makes Him so kind and redemptive, is that like if we're making the choices that we make after a desire to follow him and pursue him, I really believe that the Lord honors that and is going to bless you in whatever context you're in. So I think that's kind of one of the ways that you can, like, not stress the small stuff. Like, seek to be making good decisions. Seek the Lord, seek wise counsel, go to his word, pray about it. But if you're making decisions for the purpose of, like, all right, Lord, I want what you want for my life, I really don't believe that he's going to lead you off track in that. And, like, God doesn't waste our time either. So even if you go and have a season where you make a wrong decision, the wrong decision, or you feel like this is wasted time, like, the Lord's promise is that he redeems everything. So there's not a wasted moment of our life that he can't use. So just to speak peace over you guys, because I know that there can be such anxiety over, like, what do I do? Am I going to make the right choice? Am I going to, like, the Lord goes before you and behind you and beside you, and, like, it's going to be okay.
Thank you, guys.